We are back with a brand new video. In today's video, and we're going to be starting a new series on this channel where we regrade every single NBA draft from the 2010 NBA draft onwards. Make sure you guys like the video if you guys enjoy this concept. Subscribe if you guys are new. And yeah, let's get right into it, man. If you guys have any suggestions to spice up the series, let me know down in the comment section below. But I do want to do this from this or last decade onwards. I almost said this decade. I forgot we were in 2022. But yeah, let's get right into it, man. We're gonna be starting off with the 2010 NBA draft. We're gonna be only doing the draft lottery, and the reason is I don't want to make this a 30-minute video. I don't want to do a lot of these the late round picks. I will be highlighting if they did have some steals later down the line, and I might give some special honorable mentions to some of these teams right here. But I'm not going to go through every single pick in the first round. I'm going to go through every single pick in the lottery, and then if I find players that deserve honorable mentions as far as teams that really got some steals down low later in that draft, I will be mentioning them and shouting those teams out. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Starting off with the number 1 overall pick, the Washington Wizards selected John Wall out of Kentucky University of Kentucky. I don't know why I said Kentucky University, but John Wall was the number 1 overall pick. As we all know, man, John Wall in his prime was one of the most electrifying players in basketball. He did suffer a couple of injuries later down the line, but I think we can all say that this was a home run pick for the Washington Wizards. And I think if they were presented the opportunity to draft this, redraft this draft class, I think John Wall, even if in some people's eyes he's not the best player here, I still think that he would go number 1 or at worst number 2. So this pick is getting an A+ because I think they absolutely nailed it. My criteria for this is very, very simple. An A+ would signify to me that if this team was presented an opportunity to draft this player again, that they would do it. And A+ for number 1 overall pick signifies that they met all the expectations that were placed on them coming into the league. A is very similar to A+, except it's not as solidified as an A+ for me, obviously. B is an above average grade, C is completely average, D is below expectations, and F is completely bust. So that's how I usually look at these grades. But yeah, number 1 overall pick, John Wall. I think if you have anything other than an A or an A+, I think it's really, really confusing to me. But I think a lot of you guys will have the same grade as me here. I have an A+. If you have an A, I wouldn't disagree. The injuries really hurt John Wall, man. He was one of my favorite players. He's one of the best players in the league when he was in his prime. 5-time All-Star, All-NBA once, All-Defensive once. Won the slam dunk contest, All-Rookie first team, All-American in college. Like, he had a great career. He had a great career, and he has the opportunity to win a championship in the next coming years with the Los Angeles Clippers, who I'm excited to see going into this season. Let's move on to the number 2 overall pick, who is Evan Turner, who came out of The Ohio State University. He had a great college career, apart from the fact that he had one of the most gruesome injuries where he almost broke his back. But yeah, Evan Turner is the 2nd overall pick, was the 2nd overall pick for the Philadelphia 76ers from this draft. And for the Philadelphia 76ers, I'm not going to lie, it wasn't too bad of a pick. Now, obviously, when you're looking back on it right now, there are a lot of players that you might put ahead of Evan Turner in the pecking order as far as who would be, number 1, number 2, number 3 in a redraft. But as far as what they got at Evan Turner, I believe that he had his best years under his belt in Philadelphia itself. Once he left Philadelphia, went to Indiana, I think that's when he started to fall off a little bit. But then he went to Portland, carved out a nice role for himself on those playoff caliber teams. Same with Boston. But I think Philadelphia was really, he had a couple years in Philadelphia where he averaged 15+ points per game, and he had a couple really nice years. Apart from that, though, I wouldn't really say he was worth the 2nd overall pick. So I mean, it's very tough because I know injuries played a little bit of part into it. He missed some time here and there, so it's not completely on him. But for the grade that I'm trying to give, it would probably be like a C- or maybe even a D+. For the 2nd overall pick, there's a lot of guys that you would probably take over him at this point, but he still carved out himself 10 years in the league, man. It's just for the 2nd overall pick, it was pretty underwhelming. So Evan Turner is probably gonna get like a C+ for me. I mean C- for me. The next player is Derek Favors. Derek Favors is the next player, and he's actually been a very solid NBA player throughout his career. He's very steady. He's not too flashy. He plays for OKC now. But I think Derek Favors has been one of the most consistent players in the NBA, man. there's a reason he's stuck around in this league, because a lot of teams value him as a solid, average, above average role player, depending on who you ask. He obviously was drafted by the New Jersey Nets, but then was traded after his rookie season to Utah, and then he carved out a very solid career for himself in Utah, man. He played about 8 or 9 years there, and he had a couple of really good years. You know, I'm talking about years where he was averaging 16-8, 13-9. You know, he was having some good years in Utah. Went to New Orleans, became like a backup kind of player, then went back to Utah again last season. Now plays for OKC. He's had a pretty, you know, consistent career, solid career. But as far as the 3rd overall pick is concerned, nothing too special. I'd probably give him an average C, because I think that's what he's been. He's just been a very average player throughout his career. Nothing too special, but he's definitely not a bust, if you ask me. The 4th overall pick, though, might be a bust. Wesley Johnson, depending on who you ask, was the 4th overall pick. Not depending on who you ask with the 4th overall pick, but depending on who you ask, might be a bust. But he was the 4th overall pick to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Played basketball at both Ohio State and Syracuse. I mean, not Ohio State, Iowa State and Syracuse, if I'm not mistaken. After playing for the Timberwolves, he went to the Suns, Lakers, Clippers, Pelicans, Wizards, and then played overseas for a year. He's obviously very well known for that moment with James Harden, where he absolutely crossed him into smithereens when he was on the Clippers and Harden was on the Rockets. Wesley Johnson was an okay NBA player. He was nothing really special to me. I mean, he didn't really have any like great years. He was solid. He had a couple of 9 points per game years. You know, he shot 36%, 37% from 3 1 year with the Lakers. He had a couple of good years with the Lakers. I think the Lakers years was probably his best ones. But for someone who was drafted that high, it was very underwhelming. I'd probably give him like a C minus. Actually, no, I'm giving Wesley Johnson a D. I think that was very underwhelming for him. I don't think he's completely a bust because he was in the league for a while, but Wesley Johnson is gonna get a D. So yeah, I mean, it's very tough to grade someone like that, because I gave Evan Turner a C minus. Wesley Johnson, I think, deserves a lower grade than Evan Turner, so he's gonna get like a D, maybe a D plus depending on who you ask. But that's my grade for Wesley Johnson. DeMarcus Cousins was the 5th overall pick with the Sacramento Kings from the University of Kentucky. Obviously, was teammates with John Wall, one of the best college basketball teams of all time. Man, that team was very talented. But as we all know, man, Big Boogie, Sacramento, New Orleans, Golden State. He bounced around after that injury, man. Golden State, Houston, Clippers. Played for the Lakers a little bit, if I'm not mistaken. Played for the Bucks last season and for the Nuggets. And I'm not sure if he's signed with a team right now. He might not be signed. I don't know if he's signed with the team as of right now. But as far as, you know, the Sacramento Kings picking someone at 5, especially with the Kings' bad drafting history over the past couple of years, even though they have improved it with Keegan Murray this season, I'm gonna give DeMarcus Cousins an A+ as a pick. I think this pick, especially because he was a 5th pick, some people could argue that he's a lock for a top 3, even a top 2 position in this draft. And injuries really played a big part of that. You know, the reason why he might not be 3rd or 2nd in a redraft. He might be number 1 if he had stayed healthy, because this guy was an absolute monster in his prime. You're talking about someone who was giving you 28-12, 25-12, 27-12. Like, he was giving you a lot of buckets, and he was rebounding. He could shoot the ball. He was ahead of his time with the shooting. He could bring the ball up, play make a little bit. Obviously rebound. You know, this is someone who averaged about 5 assists per game when he was playing in New Orleans with Anthony Davis and Drew Holiday. All he needed was some talent around him. As soon as he got talent around him, he just got injured, and it was a devastating injury for him. I'm pretty sure it was an Achilles, and yeah, it did not look good for him after that. You know, he carved out a serviceable role for him in Golden State. He averaged like 16-8, if I'm not mistaken, in that Golden State year. Then has bounced around Houston, Clippers, Lakers, Bucks, Nuggets. He was pretty solid with the Nuggets last season, especially in the playoffs. I thought he played pretty well. But the injuries are always going to be a big what if with DeMarcus Cousins. But he does, you know, he has still carved out a very solid career for himself. 4-time NBA All-Star, two times All-NBA second team. Olympic champion, all rookie first team. Like, he's done a very good job in the NBA so far. I would love him to get a ring. You know, he's one of the guys I do want to see get a championship just to solidify that resume. But, you know, he's gonna have to, you know, go out and ring chase a little bit if he wants to do that, because he's not signed with the team yet. But this pick is gonna get an A+ for me. I think this is one of the best picks in the draft. Ekpe Udoh, number 6 overall pick to the Golden State Warriors. I'm gonna keep it short with this one. He did not have a good career. He did not have a good career at all. This pick would probably get a D- or even an F. He just did not really play that long in the league. Only had about 6 or 7 years, which is a okay amount of time, but it's not a long enough time where I would consider it to be a long NBA career. I think 6 years is not really the longest, if you ask me. Yeah, I just don't think he was as good as he was supposed to be coming out of Baylor. I think that Ekpe Udoh, I mean, he had some talent at that big man position. Obviously, you know, he's a legend over there in Nigeria and in the Euro League. He's won a lot of championships in the Euro League, but in the NBA, he really struggled at times, man. I'm not gonna lie. So yeah, I'm gonna keep it short with this one. It's probably gonna be a D- or an F. Greg Monroe, next player from the Detroit Pistons, was drafted out of Georgetown. Georgetown has a lot of bigs that they can represent, and Greg Monroe is one of them. Recently got back in the league last season. I'm pretty sure played with Minnesota. You know, he played with a couple of teams last season. Played with Minnesota, played with Utah, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, Greg Monroe, he started off in Detroit as a pretty solid NBA player, man. He was averaging 16 and 10. Multiple seasons he was averaging 16 and 10. And it's like second, third, fourth, and fifth year, and even sixth year, he was averaging 16 and 10, man. He was going crazy. But after he got traded to Milwaukee, that's when his minutes diminished. He didn't really have that big of a role. He got to, you know, Phoenix, didn't really look good for him. Toronto was really when he started declining, man. That 2018 season, man. He bounced around a little bit. Did have a couple of good games in Philadelphia. I think it was like 3 games or something. And then went back to Minnesota, Washington, Milwaukee, and I think last played in Utah, which was last season. But he had an okay NBA career. Nothing too special, though. You know, I gave Derek Favors a C. I'd probably give Greg Monroe a C as well, because I think that they both had a couple of really solid careers. Greg Monroe has carved out a nice long career for himself, so I'm gonna give him a C as well. Especially because he was not like a top 3 pick. He was a 7th pick, which is, for a 7th pick, that's not bad at all. Al-Farouq Aminu is next on the list. And with Al-Farouq Aminu, man, it's very interesting, because Al-Farouq Aminu is obviously known for his Portland Trailblazer times. But he actually wasn't even drafted by the Trailblazers. He played on the Trailblazers later. Coming out of Wake Forest, you know, he was drafted by the Los Angeles Clippers. And I'm pretty sure was involved in that Chris Paul trade that sent him to New Orleans. Went to Dallas, then went to Portland. I mean, Al-Farouq Aminu's carved out an okay career for himself, man. I'm not gonna lie. He's still playing the league right now, which is good. And for, you know, his draft selection, which was like the 8th overall pick, I think a role player that Al-Farouq Aminu was, I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I think, you know, an average role player deserves a grade like a C, maybe a C-, because I think Derek Favors has been better than Al-Farouq Aminu, but I wouldn't be opposed to either one. I'm gonna give it a C though, because I think for the 8th overall pick, you got a pretty serviceable player out of it if you're Los Angeles, and the Clippers used that pick to next year to help them land Chris Paul, so they were happy. But yeah, I'm gonna give that a C for now. Moving on to the Utah Jazz, who were the 9th selection. They selected Gordon Hayward from Butler. Now, Gordon Hayward, obviously he's playing for Charlotte right now, but when he was in Utah, man, he had a couple of nice breakout seasons. He had an all-star selection here and there. I'm going to give this pick an A. The reason it's not an A+ is because I think there is a gap between the John Walls, the DeMarcus Cousins, and the Gordon Haywards of the world. So it's not a complete, you know, home run A+ pick for me. But I think an A is still very, very solid, man. He had a couple of really good years, and he was on track to be a really good signing for the Boston Celtics if it wasn't for that gruesome injury. And I think it was the first game of the season, he suffered that injury. But yeah, man. I mean, that was very tough to watch. You know, he came back from that injury, did not really look that great. Last couple of years, he's done pretty well with Charlotte, but again, has missed some time. So I think he's been pretty, you know, injury prone over the last couple of parts of his, you know, career. But when he was in Utah, he was a problem, man. He was a very, very underrated player. Was a first-time All-Star in like 2017 or something like that. But yeah, I mean, he's his only really accolade is that he's an All-Star, but everyone knows that he's been an above average NBA player throughout his career. And it was a very good pick for the Utah Jazz at the 9th overall selection. So I'm going to give this an A. The next pick is arguably the best pick in the draft. You know, depending on who you ask, Paul George at 10. As far as value, as far as talent, I think it's the best pick in the draft. Unfortunately for John Wall, the injuries really derailed him, and I think Paul George has had a better career than him. So I think this is going to be an automatic A+ for me. Not only was this a home run pick at number 10, they also got the player who has the best resume in this draft as of right now. He's a 7-time All-Star, All-NBA first team once, third team 5 times, defensive team 4 times, all-rookie team, most improved player, steals leader. And if it wasn't for that injury, he might have had more, accolades. Paul George, man, one of my favorite players in the league. I'm just a huge fan of his game. I might be biased by saying that he was the best pick, but I think he was the best pick. He had that gruesome injury in that Team USA scrimmage that really kept him out for a couple of, for I think that 2014-2015 season. But when he came back from that, when he turned into PG-13 from PG-24, and in that Oklahoma City season, I think that was his best season, man. I know a lot of people talk about Indiana Paul George, but Oklahoma City Paul George is slept on. I'm not going to lie. In 2018-19, this guy was giving you 28, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals per game. And he was averaging 44, 39, and 84% from the free throw line. Like, he was going nuts. He was top 3 in MVP voting. I can go on and on and on and talk about Paul George, man, but I don't have the time to do all that. I'm just going to say this was the best pick in the draft, A+ for the Indiana Pacers. The next pick we have is Cole Aldridge. Now, Cole Aldridge, I'm not going to lie, did not really have the longest NBA career. I think he only had 7 years. I'm not sure if it was 8 or 7, but it wasn't as long as some of these other guys here. And again, while he was in the NBA, he did not play too much. But for a guy who was not selected extremely high, I mean, he was a lottery pick, but for the 11th overall pick, I don't think it was like the most disappointing thing in the world. But I can understand why it was disappointing for sure, because he was selected in the lottery. If I were to give this a grade, it would probably be a D. Again, bounced around the league a little bit, did not really stick in one place. I always remember him from the Clippers years, but he did play in New York before that, Sacramento, OKC, Houston, and then finished off in Minnesota. But yeah, just not the most entertaining career, not the longest career. I'm gonna give it a D. And then now we're going to the back end of the lottery, man. 12th pick has been Xavier Henry. Xavier Henry played at Kansas, man. He was a bucket at Kansas, but unfortunately for him in the NBA, he only played 5 seasons. He did play with the Lakers. I remember that season he played with the Lakers. He was on that 2014 team, if I'm not mistaken. But again, it's just not really, enough of a career for me to suggest that anything apart from like a D- or even an F, man, because he just did not have a long career. He only played 5 seasons in the league. The 5th season was really only 9 games, so it's really only 4 seasons. He missed a lot of time. In total, out of his 5 seasons, he only played 185 games, which is like a little more than 2 full seasons is what he played. I'm giving this is probably going to be the worst grade. It's probably going to be an F or even a D-, because even though he was a bucket getter in college, and the NBA just did not really work out, I'm probably going to give him an F. I'm not going to lie, because he's just a guy who just did not play in the league too long at all. For a lottery pick, it's just, you have to be at least serviceable for a certain amount of time. He only was available for 185 games, and in those 185 games, he was not stellar in any of those games. He's going to get an F for me. I'm not going to lie. He's going to get an F for me. Next grade is for the 13th overall pick, which is the second to last pick in the lottery. The Toronto Raptors selected Ed Davis from the UNC, the University of North Carolina. Ed Davis had a okay career, man. He's had an okay career as a backup center. Recently finished off in Cleveland, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if he's retired. He's just not signed yet. But he played a couple of games in Cleveland last season. Overall, though, just not the most entertaining career. I'd probably give this a D+. I think this is a better career than Cole Aldridge for sure, but I don't think it's enough to put him alongside Derek Favors and Greg Monroe, who had a couple of really, really solid years. Ed Davis was okay, but he was nothing more than okay. At times, he was below average. Nothing special there about Ed Davis, man. But for the 13th overall pick, I don't really think you were expecting a superstar either. So it's tough if you're the second to last pick in the lottery. But for someone who they selected in the lottery itself, this is probably going to be a D+ for me. And then the last pick in the draft was Patrick Patterson. Not in the draft, sorry, in the lottery was Patrick Patterson, who was selected by the Houston Rockets, if I'm not mistaken. He went to Kentucky. Yep, Houston Rockets. Another Kentucky guy with John Wall, DeMarcus Cousins. Kentucky just be breeding players, man. Played in Houston a couple seasons. He averaged, I think his best season was like 12 and 4. He was never the best rebounder, but his biggest ability was to stretch the floor. He was really good at shooting the ball. He played a couple seasons with the Clippers. Before that, he played with Toronto a little bit for, I think, 4 years. Oklahoma City for a couple years. Sacramento. Again, not the most illustrious career or most exciting career, but as far as what he accomplished, I think he played in the NBA for a longer time than a lot of people would have. And yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna give this a D+. I think it's gonna be the same grade as Ed Davis. I think they're on the same exact tier, not the same tier as Cole Aldridge, so they're above them. But at the same time, they're not the same tier as the Derek Favors and the Greg Monroes of the world. So it'll probably be a C- or a D+ for both Ed Davis as well as Patrick Patterson. And that's going to be the end of the draft lottery. Now, again, this is not the most stacked draft, especially if you're looking at the bottom end picks. But there were a couple of guys that I do want to give a shout out to who did exceed expectations for where they were selected. Hassan Whiteside, selected with the 33rd pick. I think we can all agree that if Hassan Whiteside was to be redrafted in this draft, he would probably be a lottery pick, even though he fell off after his Miami years. That really hurts me as a Heat fan. He did have a very solid career for himself, and he's still a very good backup center in this league, who's still, I'm not sure if he's a free agent right now. He still might be, but, after the Miami years, he played with Portland. He was a solid center for them. Sacramento, he was okay. Utah, he was okay. I think he's carved out a solid career for himself after that Miami run where he really broke out after Miami brought him in from overseas. Nemanja Bjelica, who was an NBA champion last season with the Golden State Warriors, was the 35th overall pick. I think he deserves a lot of credit as well. Just because he was, I think he would be a lottery pick as well if he was redrafted in this year. I just think that he's carved out a very solid career for himself. He's a very skilled NBA player, and I think he's had a couple of good years. So I'm gonna give Bjelica some love. The last player that we're gonna be talking about, as far as guys who could be considered as steals, Lance Stevenson. Lance Stevenson was selected with the 40th overall pick. As we all know, man, Lance is an entertainer, but he was also a hooper back in his day. This is a guy who was hooping with the Indiana Pacers, with the Memphis Grizzlies. And to this day, I'm pretty sure he's still been hooping. I'm pretty sure he averaged 9 points a game with the Pacers last season. So Lance Stevenson deserves a lot of credit, and there is no doubt in my mind he would be a lottery pick in the same redraft if it was to be redrafted again. But yeah, that's where we're gonna wrap up the video, man. Let me know if you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what year you want me to do next. It'll probably be 2011, but we'll see. I mean, yeah, I'll see y'all later as always, man. Have a nice day. Peace.